Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you again so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. Let's take another look here at Bitcoin. It's weird to see green on the charts here for a change, but gotta keep in mind we're only 25 minutes into this daily candle and a lot of things are kind of just balancing out. So it's been bloody red all day long. Most coins, altcoins specifically, down 5 to 10%. I think Bitcoin was 6% on the day if I'm not mistaken. We'll take a look at that here soon. And on the charts, just so you know, if you're kind of getting back up to speed, if you missed earlier today's analysis, this area is essentially the area in which we wanted to consider shorting because there is a more local point of control in that range, and it's important to recognize that Bitcoin keeps pushing to these levels here and keeps rejecting out before those levels occur. So points of control are nice; they very much help us understand where we're at. But the downtrend is so strong that most of the entries that we're trying to find aren't even happening because the price doesn't even pull back, it just keeps running. So again, that's good and bad depending on how you look at it. Either way you look at it, it is good because we are getting closer to the CME gap down here. So if you're not familiar on CME futures, there's essentially a pretty significant gap down below that we're getting close to, and generally those gaps get filled. Basically just means that, that when the CME is closed, you can see that there's a significant gap up, and a lot of times there's tons of profit to be taken from those who had longs going into it. So it's an interesting thing, but it's a very real thing, and we're getting much closer to that. Fundamental analysis aside, from a technical standpoint, that's very good. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the backend data here and kind of see where we're at. Let's refresh and go from there. Quick congrats, of course, to our community members for some pretty solid profits here today. Again, congrats on that. We got BNB short 26%, Solana short 42, AVAX 44% short, and then two ICP 39 and 37% shorts. And that's all profit taken last couple of days here. But you got to keep in mind, some of those trades we took last week, they're not like fresh. Well, actually, no, that there two of them were taken this week. But the simple way to understand it is that swing trades don't hit instantly, right? You got to recognize it takes a little bit of time to mature. So we use low leverage, low position sizing to ensure we're not getting destroyed along the way. So if you're getting tired of getting liquidated, maybe you want to change your strategy or perhaps jump on board. We do got limited slots available, CryptoCache.tech, link down below. So let's talk about this here. When we look at smaller time frames, we can see pretty massive accumulation here, or just 1 billion right there at exactly 60,400. That's a pretty significant margin there. Either way you look at it, but if you kind of spread it out, there's still billions of dollars left in liquidation. But if you can see here, we can zoom in, it's pretty obvious that there is each one of these lines, there was probably a good 20 to 30 billion in liquidation today alone. Okay, again, majority of those are late longs. Some of them are longs from before that either didn't take profits or just let their trades essentially close out at break even. Again, generally speaking, when it's liquidation, it's not going to be break even unless they secured some profit. We never truly know, but it's easy to summarize that they're likely taking a loss if they're getting liquidated, right? It's kind of the concept there. Either way you look at it, there's still more loss to be had. We got about a $10 billion line right there, essentially a bar, whatever you want to call it, at 60,600. So I think 60,000 is still more likely to get hit. Now, will it hit this weekend? Maybe not. Just depends on how the Asian markets want to open their Saturday, which is happening here soon. So we're going to find out, of course, but my anticipation is that things are going to cool off a little bit this weekend, and then we might see one more last rake down to that 59K mark. If that level doesn't hold, then we'll reevaluate and see what lower ranges are next. There's a lot of volume at 54, 55K? Let's see. If I'm not mistaken, between 51.5 and 54,000 is a significant margin of liquidation. And look at these, each one of these lines. I mean, that's 10 billion for each one of these red lines here, just about. So there's it's crazy. There's 50 billion right at 52,000, plus or minus a few hundred. Insane. The amount of numbers and just money getting just flushed down the toilet consistently is crazy to me. And again, a lot of it's based on these moon boys promoting just way too much leverage, and it's just ridiculous. So just because you can doesn't mean you have to. We'll just leave it at that. Conversation for later. Let's talk a little bit about the daily time frame. We'll go and remove these little guys just so we can get better perspective on what's going on. And when we look at the daily time frame, generally, closing above or below certain moving averages is either good or bad. Again, we got our larger time frame. Let's go ahead and zoom out. Actually, I'm curious about the point of control for the last since February, March, April, May, June, July. That's roughly 6 months worth of data here. In this range, the last 6 months, we've seen the heaviest amount of volume at 67,000. We know that. We've talked about that. Secondary to that is 63,000, coincidentally. So we can we can consider or summarize that the next area of resistance is going to be 63,000 because again we closed below that level. So big picture, not like that's a definitive line in the sand, but generally speaking, 67,000 gave us a lot of problems going both directions. Now that we're below it, 63K should be the new area of resistance. So if I'm going to consider a short, just loosely thinking out loud based on macro, I would say 63K is a good solid consideration. Again, I keep saying levels of retracement that are good when the price doesn't even come back up to that level. So 63K may not even be promised right now. But me thinking out loud, going into the weekend here with three red candles effectively on the 4-hour time frame. I'll talk about that in a minute. I think there's a decent chance we see a slight, and I mean slight, relief rally this weekend. Okay, so let's take a look here at the SMAs. First of all, the 200-day SMA is the last line of defense at 61.5. We talked about that earlier. I'm honestly a little surprised we hit that this soon, but again, a 6% correction. Let's see, actually, hold on. We had a 6.5. You could round up and say 7% correction on a 24-hour period from Bitcoin. That's a pretty aggressive Friday. We've been having some red Fridays, but I'd say that takes a cake considering we haven't seen one of those in a while. That was a Thursday, one of the hardest ones. Okay, anyways, let's look at the important data here. First of all, we're not even quite towards 30 on the RSI, implying we still have more room for downtrend. I know it seems crazy how hard we've been falling back, but if you look at the big picture, we're still ranging in a pretty significant range. Again, you zoom out. Low range 54,000, upper range 74,000. It's a $20,000 range, but Bitcoin is holding that range pretty strong. So either way you look at it, this is nothing abnormal. Much more room for downside. 54K does seem like a likely consideration now, based on how much volume and liquidation is there. That, coupled with the amount of greed in the market, or more importantly, the amount of fear that we have in the market right now, leads me to believe that we're going to see a price point of that magnitude if we lose 60K. But me personally, just thinking out loud, I want to take a long around 60,000, and I feel like taking a short around 63K. We're smack dab in the middle of that right now. So again, to each their own, but me personally, I like to be able to get in when there's a little more confirmation, and right now with the price running, it's not a lot of confirmation, just to be honest with you. Okay, so anyways, we're under all that. Let's just summarize, say that the daily time frame looks terrible, which is basically the premise here, and we're barely holding above water at 61.5. But that's the 200-day SMA on the daily, notoriously a strong support range. So once again, that could lead us to somewhat of a green weekend. But again, I wouldn't expect miracles this weekend. We take a look here, though. This is what I'm referring to here, and we see a pretty consistent pattern of behavior. Every time we have 3 red candles, we see a 4th green candle. So I'm speculating the next 4-hour period will be green. Okay. Again, hindsight, for the most part, is 2020, and they have this is the reason why this exists, is because generally most trends last somewhere in the range of 72 hours. Obviously, that's not 72 hours if you take these 12-hour periods, but when you go in a larger term time frame, you'll see 3 daily candlesticks typically closing in either 3 greens or 3 reds. The 4th day is always follow there, but either way you look at it, the history here, more recent, more relevant, 4-hour time frame does indicate that we have a pretty consistent pattern there. Either way you look at it, patterns don't always happen, but they generally do. So it really depends on your thought process there, but we are bouncing or potentially bouncing off 30 on the RSI. That's generally a favorable sign for the most part when you see the price action hit that overextended state, which we saw here recently, right? The price recovered, okay? Not a good recovery, that was a false positive, but that was somewhere in the range of 3.5 to 4% on that little push, okay? So again, hypothetically, we should see a little push here leading into the weekend. It may or may not hang out or hold rather, but again, it's up to you on what you want to do with that. Me personally, taking along here soon seems appropriate, just based on how overextended we are to the downside, and more likely than not, most selling pressure leading into the weekend results in a positive weekend. But I would urge caution and just make sure you watch your trades closely. If I do end up taking a trade this weekend, it'll only be with coins that are notoriously strong and respond well, and or have been responding well to Bitcoin selling off. Those that are range bound right now while Bitcoin's going down versus those that are dumping like super hard. Okay. Either way you look at it, 4-hour time frame, same scenario here overall. Truly bearish, minus that outlier here of potentially bouncing off of 30/20 on the MFI, which commonly can result in a positive brief uptrend. I wouldn't expect much this weekend though, folks. Okay, hourly, Ichimoku Cloud. Big surprise, whole lot of nothing here. And what I mean by nothing is just nothing good, right? There's nothing here telling us we're in good shape. This 62,300 was just a more local low. It was tested twice and broke to the downside, so definitely no double bottom there. Now that that's happened, we can presume 62,200 is the initial resistance for us. And then secondary to that, again, based on that point of control, 63,000 based on macro. So roughly here and roughly here would be two considerations for a short entry. Or if you're going to insist on a long, those would be good solid take profit targets. Something to think about. All right, so again, just depends on what you want to do, what your risk tolerance is. Whatever you do, I just recommend low leverage, low position size. The only coin I ever 10x is Bitcoin. And that's just because the movements are generally quite, I wouldn't say, and it's not something you can anticipate at all times, but Bitcoin for the most part is a little more, less of a wild card, I guess we'll just put it that way, than altcoins. Okay, so in that sense, I 10x that, but every other coin is 5x. So future reference for our trades here, again, I shared this with you already, ICP, AVAX, Solana, BNB, all of these trades that we took, including Caspa, they're all 5x leverage. Okay, so you just got to recognize it's not, it's it's not what you trade, it's how you trade that's important, right? Just like real life, it's not what you do, it's why you do what you do that defines you. So why do you trade with high leverage? Well, maybe you should look inside and think about that. Anyways, those are all things I teach in my Trading Academy for the most part, and I hope that you have learned something here today. Thank you again so much for your support. Those who like the video and potentially even comment below, love to hear it. And thanks to those who are with me from the 3 years plus crew. That's really phenomenal. Super awesome. Thanks again. We'll continue keeping on here, folks. Appreciate your support. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Take care.